7 hours before the Deepwater Horizon rig exploded, 4 senior executives flew out for a safety visit. They walked the site, asked questions, congratulated the crew on 7 years without a lost time injury. And then, later, the rig blew up. Andrew Hopkins' analysis shows something uncomfortable. The visit didn't fail because leaders ignored safety. It failed because they focused, in hindsight, on the wrong kinds of threats. Today's paper isn't about incompetent people or bad apples. It's about how well-meaning safety walkarounds can quietly reinforce a risk blindness within organizations. G'day everyone, welcome to Safe As. I'm Dr. Ben Hutchinson. Today's source is Hopkins 2011, titled Management Walkarounds, Lessons from the Gulf of Mexico Oil Well Blowout, published in Safety Science. Hopkins' main claim is that management walkarounds, even when well-intentioned, often drift towards routine occupational safety issues like slips, trips, housekeeping, or systematically missing major hazard risks. And a note up front, this kind of analysis is inevitably shaped by hindsight and counterfactuals. Still, Hopkins' argument is careful and worth seriously considering. 7 hours before the blowout, 4 company VIPs helicoptered onto the rig for a management visibility tour. Despite their focus on safety, their experience as rig managers and drilling engineers, the cooperation of rig staff meant that some critical warning signs were missed or misinterpreted. Hopkins argues that although the visit was framed as a safety initiative, the VIPs paid almost no attention to safety critical activities that were occurring during their visit. Their attention was drawn instead to a recent slip injury elsewhere and on congratulating the crew for 7 years without a lost time injury. On the day of the visit, critical well testing was underway. Personnel were actively debating how to run the test and how to interpret its results. The VIPs were told this, but, quoting the paper, asked no more questions about this and moved on to a social conversation about the history of the company. Later, one VIP asked the rig manager whether the test had gone well. After receiving a thumbs up, he accepted the reassurance. Hopkins notes that this question clearly invited the response he got, and that he did not probe for evidence. The VIPs said that they would have offered advice if asked, but they weren't. Hopkins comments that there was no recognition that this was an opportunity to do some auditing, to check on competence, and to verify that they were complying with procedures critical to safety. Mud flow monitoring that day was severely degraded, making it difficult to reliably match inflow with outflow. Hopkins argues that probing how monitoring was being done could have revealed serious deficiencies, but no one asked. The VIPs were also aware that one of the final safeguards against blowouts was about to be removed that afternoon, yet their engagement remained social and non-interventional, rather than focused on how safety was being managed. Hopkins then asks, why did this behaviour make sense to them? First, the VIPs focused on checking conditions rather than behaviours, inspection records, equipment status, because these are easier to verify than decisions and judgments in complex processes. Second, they were reluctant to interfere. Given professional hierarchies and specialised roles, they didn't want to interject or bypass chain of command authority. Third, they saw intervention as justified only for obvious immediate danger, not for ambiguous process risks that look banal in everyday work. Next, Hopkins draws a distinction between personal safety and process safety. Personal safety hazards are often the frequent and low consequence types. These slips and trips and minor injuries. Process safety hazards are rare, high consequence, and often invisible in routine injury statistics. One VIP later identified his focus was on occupational safety, so personal safety, not process safety. He was concerned about whether pushing a button or turning a wrench endangered the person doing it, not whether doing that task might trigger an explosion. Hopkins then critiques the stop work authority. Workers on the rig had stopped work in the past, but only for personal safety risks. No one was aware of well operations being stopped for major hazard reasons. One operator felt uncomfortable about simultaneous operations that made mud flow monitoring nearly impossible, but he didn't treat that discomfort as a stop work trigger. Hopkins then argues that leadership behaviour reinforced this by avoiding disruption and not probing deeply. The VIP sent a subliminal message. You'd need an exceptionally good reason to stop work. Finally, Hopkins proposes how walkarounds could be better. Leaders should be briefed on major hazards beforehand. They should understand critical controls and verify that those controls work. They should probe how lessons from the past accidents have been transferred. They should observe safety critical processes directly. They should treat some parts of some walkarounds at least as partial audits, not just social visits, even if this slows down work. That's it on Safe As. Please like, comment and subscribe on YouTube, and links in show notes if you'd like to support the channel.